This is the Sales Bible Podcast, episode 267, Digital Prospecting versus Cold Calling, an interview with Ken Guest.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Hello, Sales Babblers. This is Pat Helmers. If you're like me, you probably got the same question I've got, like social selling, prospecting on LinkedIn, cold calling. Does any of this stuff still work? Things have changed so much most recently. I have no idea what's working, what's not working. Are you thinking that way? Well, that's why I decided to have Ken Guest on the podcast. Ken is the author of the book Digital Prospecting, and he does a terrific job of explaining the process that he uses to connect and convert them into a real conversation. The advice on this episode is highly practical. Get your pen and pencil out, and let's take some notes. And if you haven't, and if you can't do that right now, if you're in the car or whatnot, I'll take notes for you in the show notes. So, with no further ado, let's get to it. Welcome, Ken. You ready to babble?
I certainly am, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's my honor. I got your book in my hand here. It's called Digital Prospecting: Finding, Nurturing, and Closing Sales with Social Technologies. You're the author with some guy named Mike Jones, right?
Yes, we co-authored this one and pretty excited about it. It was actually stemmed from a topic. We wrote a previous book called Selling in Manufacturing and Logistics, and one of the chapters we wrote, we talked about the value of email prospecting. And Mike and I, neither one are millennials. We're far from it, so we're kind of self-taught with this thing. But as a result of that chapter, it kind of morphed into this new book.
But I believe this book, the whole point of this book is it would have value for millennials, right? Because it's about how selling has really changed, here in the 21st century.
Yeah, it certainly has. And we actually, we're hoping there's value for all generations, because we were exposed in what we do. We're exposed to salespeople, who are more veteran, shall we say. And then we have the younger generation and millennials. And it's a constant ask of us is, how do we prospect today? There's so many different ways to do it. It's so different from when I grew up in sales. I started in sales 25 years ago, and there wasn't a lot of options other than cold calling at that point. So it is a very different world.
Now, I've had a million people on this podcast, and we've talked about stuff like this. And as you could probably guess, I'll tell you, I'm pretty skeptical about all of this because, everybody talks about social media is the thing, But quite frankly, in the B2B space, not a lot of people want to be sold on Facebook, and they don't have Twitter accounts, and they certainly aren't Pinterest, and people are on LinkedIn only on average 4 minutes a week, I believe. I've seen some schedules. They quick hop on, read something, and then pop off. Postcards. But I met a guy the other day that says, "Oh yeah, I still get postcards, and yeah, I follow up with those people." I'm like, "Really?" He's an IT guy, so
Wow.
texting. What's your advice here? How? I was flipping through your book talking about how sales managers may have thought that that cold calling really works, but they haven't done it recently, and so I'm babbling here. So why don't I let you answer these 5 questions I just asked in a row?
Well, let me give it a shot. So let me touch on social media first, because I'm actually with you in school of thinking with respect to trying to, quote, sell using social media. And what we teach in the book and our belief system really is not that you're reaching out to people through Facebook or Pinterest or anything else, but more importantly, you're leveraging the information that's at our fingertips that never used to be there back when I first got in sales, and a lot of us did. And so what we talk about in the book is more, are you connecting with your customers? Are you connecting with all the people that you come in contact with in your professional life? And I think there's a key point there too, coming in contact with them. We are not believers in reaching out and trying to connect to people that you don't know, that maybe you hope to know because maybe they're an ideal prospect for you. We'd rather you at least start some type of dialogue first before you're connecting to them. But once you've connected to them and they become a happy client, rather than trying to sell using social media, I would rather go to hypothetically your profile on LinkedIn and find out who you're connected to that could be potential prospects for me. And then I'm going to reach out to you, my friend, my raving fan, if you will, and ask you how you connected to that person, how you know them. Do you know them well enough? Would you be ever comfortable introducing me to talk about business? And when you start to leverage the information that's at our fingertips, but still have that personal touch, I think that's a huge difference.
I like this idea of like going on to LinkedIn, and you can learn a lot about people by looking at their LinkedIn, what they're interested, what they're not interested, who they're connected to and whatnot. But I think I got like 2,600 contacts. So, Ken, if you find somebody that I'm connected to that you think is interesting and you ask me for an introduction, I'm going to say, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Yep.
Maybe 1 out of 10 I've actually had a chat with.
And some people's profiles are like that, like yours, for example. I have a significant number of contacts as well. But what we like to, we did a study on this internally in our own office where over the course of about a 1.5 year period, we reached out to clients of ours, current clients, past clients, happy clients, and we said, hey, I see you're connected to Sally Smith. How well do you know Sally? Would you ever be comfortable introducing me? And it was interesting, the response we got. And what we were really tracking was what percentage of those people, A, knew the person
Right.
that they were actually connected to, but then B, were comfortable actually making that introduction. And it was interesting, 7 out of 10 knew the person well enough that they were willing to make an introduction. And out of those 7, 4 of those 7 would actually have a first-time conversation with us to talk about new business as a result of that. And it's real important. We point this out in the book as well. It's very important that I think you ask them to make the introduction through an email and copying you on the email. And the reason is because I like to say the person that's doing me the favor, copy me on it so I can take you out of the middle of it and then run with it from there. So you don't have to do any more work than just make that quick introduction. And oh, by the way, when you're making that introduction, you don't need to sell it for me. I'm not asking you to do my job. All I'm asking you to do is maybe make a suggestion that's worth a cup of coffee or worth a conversation or something like that. And then let me take it from there. And that's not does not require very much work on your friend's part. And so it's easier for them to do.
This is believable.
That's good.
Let me tell you why. Because I know a lot of people are very hesitant. They kind of treat LinkedIn like it's Facebook. I only want my friends on there. Only want people I know. They reject lots of people, even if there could be prospective customers. And I'm always coaching them like, you should be much more open to who you. But that's not how people are. So I wouldn't be surprised that 7 out of 10 might know them. I wouldn't be surprised. And your idea on introductions through email, that's commonly how I do it with people that I really know.
Sure.
I bump into somebody and I would send you, Ken, an email, and I send my other friend an email and says, I think you two got a lot in common. Good luck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had that happen to us numerous times. In fact, with our own sales growth here in our office, I would say almost entirely our prospecting process has turned into this. We've been around a long time, so we have a pretty good reputation. We have a lot of happy clients out there. And what we find with salespeople that we talk to, you ask this question, it's fascinating, the responses you'll get. If you ask question number 1 to a salesperson, you say, what's the number 1 way that you have gotten new accounts over the years? And invariably they say a referral of some sort. And it's also the easiest, the easiest in terms of if I'm referred in, those tend to go well. And then you ask them the second question to that is, what's your process behind asking for referrals on a monthly basis? Do you have a, number of times you try to do it every month? And invariably everybody says no, they don't have any process. And there was a statistic out that I found interesting. It said 20% of your clients will not give referrals, regardless of how happy they are, just because that's how they're wired. They just don't do that sort of thing. 20% of your clients will give you referrals without being asked to. And we've all had that happen where suddenly we get an email or a phone call that says, hey, I know somebody that you ought to talk to. But then the other 60% in the middle will give you a referral, but you have to ask. And I think in today's world, I don't really think it's as appropriate to ask, hey, Pat, who do you know in your circle of influence you'd be comfortable introducing me to? Because the way I look at that is I'm putting the burden on you to go think about it and figure it out. When in today's world of LinkedIn, I know who you know, or I should. And I should take the time to do my own research and identify 3 or 4 folks. So it's an interesting dynamic about how we can leverage that information, but still create a personal touch with it.
Yeah. So let's say they get introduced to you, and this was in the email. What kind of emails would you start sending to these people? How would I noticed you got some scripts in the book here. Maybe you could chat some about that.
Sure. So we have a couple of different types of scripts in the book. We have some scripts for an actual cold email where there is not an introduction, which, excuse me, we can talk about that in a minute. To answer your question, if somebody introduced me to you through an email, then I would kind of hit reply all, and I would say, hey, Sally, I appreciate your introduction. And then I would say something like, Pat, I don't know enough about your business to know if what we do has some synergies, but I'd certainly be open to a conversation if you would. Could we schedule a little bit of time and see if there's anything there? If you didn't reply to me, I would wait 2 weeks before I would follow up again. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the 2-week thing.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important to know. But I would wait a couple of weeks, and then I would send back another one to you, and I would say, Pat, I sent you this a few weeks ago. Hadn't heard back. Just curious if you're open to a conversation. Let me know either way. And then at some point, I'm going to wait another 2 weeks, and I'm going to send you what I like to call more of a going for a no type of thing. And I would say something like, Pat, even though Sally introduced us and thought it might be a good idea for us to get together, doesn't mean you think it's a good idea. and if that's, and if that's the case, that's okay. If you could confirm if that is the case, I won't bother you anymore. And there's some brutal honesty in that, but it's the truth, isn't it?
I love it.
Yeah, it's not abrasive. It's just if there's no interest there, just let me know, and that's fine. I completely understand that. And let me touch on the 2-week thing, because we hit on this pretty hard in the book in different areas. I'm a big believer in establishing a cadence between your email attempts or even a phone call attempt if you're still doing cold calls. I think you need to have a cadence there of timing. And I can't tell you how many salespeople we've talked to that, you ask them, how often have you reached out to this given prospect? And they'll say things like 2 and 3 times in a week. And I say to them, you scream 2 things and neither one of them are positive. You scream salesperson and you scream desperate. So I think that 2-week period, there's a subtle play in there of psychology, if you will, that, hey, I'm busy too. Right? I'm not gonna sit and hound you because I'm busy taking care of clients. I'm busy doing other things as well. But at the same time, I'm have a consistency to it, and there's a point in time that I'm really trying to get the person to tell me they're not interested. If they continue to ignore me. Because then I can move on and help somebody else and not feel like I got to continue to pester them.
I like that. I like that a lot. I think the issue that people get is what do they call lead poor, right? Don't have enough other leads to keep themselves busy, so they keep working these poor people who feel like they're being picked on, and ganged up on.
I think I would say this about the lead poor. I think there's been very few industries that I've coached or been involved with in any capacity, whether helping their salespeople or whatever, where there's an extremely limited number of leads. There's a few industries out there where you've got 30 or 40 or 50 potential clients, and that's it, just because of the very specialty product you might sell or something like that. But other than that, I think most industries, it's pretty much infinite who you can go after. And back when I got into sales, it was much more difficult to find those leads, as you described, because there wasn't as much information out there as there is today. But in today's world, I mean, it is the process I described to you earlier on the LinkedIn and doing the research, it's limitless. You know, when you think about if I had 500 connections, and I have a lot more than that, but if I had 500 connections and each of those people were connected to a couple of hundred people, it's just limitless how much, opportunity is out there if you just do the research.
So in the script, you said something. I think it makes sense for us to get to, hop on a call and have a chat. Do you do anything about sharing your value proposition? Because these are, I'm assuming in your mind, these are qualified leads. That's why you asked for the introduction, right? You think somehow or other that you might be able to help them. Do you bring any of that up?
No, not early. And there's a couple of reasons for it. Number one, my belief system says that if somebody else makes an introduction to a friend of theirs, there's enough credibility there that if that person even has remote 1% interest in having a discussion, they'll talk to me without knowing much more about what I do, just because, Sally Smith recommended it or suggested it, and I trust her judgment because she's a friend of mine. So I'm willing to talk to this person. The other reason I don't bring it up is it's that old acronym WIIFM. All they really care about is what's in it for me. And that's with all buyers. All buyers really don't care if your company's 120 years old or you've been around since this or you're the biggest or the best or whatever. They really don't care. They only want to know if you can help them. And so spending a lot of time putting your value prop into an initial email before you've ever met them, before you've ever learned any of their problems, if they have problems or anything about their company, I think is a little premature.
All right. So let's just say you do hop on a phone call with them. How long are these phone calls? How long do you schedule these for?
So I've had no less than 15 minutes. And sometimes they end early if there's absolutely nothing there. I've had a lot of people that I've literally never spoken to them other than a few emails back and forth, and they were willing to schedule a 1 hour face-to-face if they were local. And so I would do that whenever possible, of course. But I think the biggest thing there is when you actually schedule the time, I think if you're not sending your prospects homework, you're making a mistake. And here's what I mean by that. Homework, I have a client recently who was struggling with going out on appointments that were actually set by an independent third party. And then they would fly into a region and they would go on these appointments, and they were struggling because they'd go on the appointment not having set it themselves. And they would take their 6 or 7 different things that they would like to share with the typical prospect. And they spent half the time talking about things the prospect didn't care about. So, and they didn't learn this till after the meeting. So what we did was we decided to start sending this prospect homework. And all the homework is a quick email. So this is a very good use of your time. Here are the 7 things we typically talk about with clients such as yourself when we're in front of them. Cross out the 3 or 4 out of the 7 that you really don't care about. So we spend the entire time talking about things that are actually important to you. And that completely changed the dynamic of all of their meetings. They literally had 100% response rate from those prospects. And they would cross out the things they weren't interested in. And in addition, it sent a higher level of respect there in the engagement, because you as the salesperson actually cared about about my time and what was important to me. And so when we go on if I go on a meeting set up through this third party or this referring person, if you will, I would do the same thing. I would say, here's what we typically talk about what we do. Tell me what's important to you, tell me what's not. So I don't spend any time talking about things you don't care about. Completely change the dynamic in meetings.
Interesting. Super interesting. Give them homework.
Yeah. And it can't be anything more than, that's going to take more than 2 minutes to
Right.
do, because they won't do it.
Right. So interesting. All right. These are 7 things that we commonly chat about. Scratch out 3 or 4 that have nothing to do with that you are not relevant.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
And I think there's even a psychology in the way I have them do it, or the way I would do it, in saying scratch out the things you're not interested in versus tell me the things that you are. I think there's a psychology in that you're telling the person it's okay to tell me you don't like some of my stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that. Before we go, you briefly mentioned this, and I'd like to, and I don't want to miss it. You said you had a script for a cold call email. What would that be?
Yeah. So in the book we talk about some cold call email scripts, and in a cold call I will do a little bit more of a value prop, but in a slightly different way. So I would say something like, this is Ken Guest with Sandler Training, and I would start with what we like to call a pattern interrupt, which is basically saying something that doesn't sound like it's in my interest. And so, because I want to flip the dynamic, I want to get them thinking this is not the typical person. So I would say, you've probably never heard of me or my company, or my name's probably not ringing any bells, as opposed to, have you heard of me because I'm the biggest company? It's completely different. So you open with something like that, and I'll say, look, I don't know enough about your world to know if what we do could ever fit. Here's what customers tell us they like about working with us, and I would give a couple points. Prior to working with us, they were frustrated with this, and I would say something about a pain point, if you will, that they were suffering from when they came to work with me. And I would maybe list out just 2 or 3 really quicks. And it's a mini fishing expedition is what it is. You're hoping that they read it and say, one of those is relevant in my world. And then I would end it with, it would be disrespectful of me to presume that we could help you without knowing anything about your business. If you'd be open to a conversation, I'd certainly welcome it. And if you have no interest, feel free to let me know that too. And it would be some variation on that type of email. And look, does it work tremendously? I'm not going to tell you it does, because cold is still cold. I think most people would say cold calls in today's world, you're 2% to 3% at best of getting somebody to even answer the phone. And we studied this. We did a cold scripted email for about 2.5 years in our own business. And we tracked the results, and we had about 11% of the recipients that actually responded to us. Now that response could be, I have no interest, but that was the point, is trying to get a response. And
what was your percent of, you think, qualified clients that actually wanted to have a conversation?
Well, I think we're believers in, I'm not gonna pursue anybody that I don't know anything about. So I would say the bulk of the people we sent those to were people that we identified as targets. We don't spend a lot of time just blindly sending emails out, and I think we reference this in the book as well. I think with today's research that's available to you, everybody should be a target, or you shouldn't be sending anything. And I think these emails, I think another key point to remember about any cold email is, my opinion, it must at least look like it is a personal email typed out by you. It cannot look like it's from your marketing engine, that it's a form email. Now, I try to customize whenever possible. So if there's a talking point, meaning I identify a target company and I know that they're very similar to another company that I work with, I may reference that. Or I know somebody used to work at this company, I may reference some kind of personal talking point just to help personalize it even more. And again, I follow the 2-week cadence, and I would wait 2 weeks if I didn't hear from that person after the first one, and I would send back to them, forward back to them the original one, and say, hey, Pat, I sent you this a couple of weeks ago. I haven't heard back. I'd appreciate a reply either way. And that's it. And I had about a 17% response rate to that email. And then if that didn't work, we'd send another one in a couple of weeks, and it would sound something like, I've sent you a few messages I haven't heard back. I'm getting the feeling that you simply have no interest in even learning more about what I do or how I work with companies, and you're being too polite to tell me that. If you'd be kind enough to confirm my suspicions, I won't bother you anymore. So, believe it or not, what do you think the response rate to that email was?
I don't know, 1 in 3. I don't know.
71%.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's, I know it's funny, but it's really, again, it's psychology. It's giving somebody the permission to say no. Because buyers, as much as salespeople may not want to hear this, buyers are actually nice people. And they just don't want to tell you no because they don't want to hurt your feelings.
Nope, they don't.
If you give them permission, and the funniest thing was the 71% response rate, less than 10 said, confirmed, don't ever call me or email me again. Less than 10 people, not 10%. And most of the time, the people would reply back with something like to the effect of, oh, I'm sorry, I've just been busy, and I'm interested, but not now. Timing's bad. Could we circle back in 3 months? Or I get something like that. But typically they were apologizing for not responding. And it was kind of humorous, but then you kind of set yourself apart at that point for future conversations.
I like it. You briefly mentioned there, and I want to make sure everybody hears this. You're a Sandler trainer in near Akron, Ohio, right?
Yes. Mike and I both are. We have a team here in Akron, Ohio, and we also have a location in Columbus, Ohio.
And if people want to get a hold of you, how would they do that, Ken?
Best way is probably email, as I'm talking about email scripts. I might as well say email. And that's ken.guest, Guest is my last name, @sandler.com.
Excellent. And I assume you're on LinkedIn, too. I believe we are connected.
Absolutely.
On LinkedIn. Yep. Your book. How can people get your book?
A couple of different ways. You can go to shop.sandler.com and order it through Sandler's website, or it is also available on Amazon. And if you just type in my first and last name in your Amazon search box, both of our books will actually come up.
Well, Ken, I really appreciate you visiting us here on Sales Babble. This is really great stuff. There's a lot of stuff here, but the listeners, the great thing about podcasts, they can rewind and listen over and over again.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you having me. It's been fun.
It's interesting to think about what Ken's really saying here is that he's all about referral selling. He doesn't really believe in the idea of just like blindly, coldly emailing or phone calling, for that matter, strangers and trying to turn them into prospects. So it might be worth your time to spend a moment, a little bit, every day, and start connecting with people on LinkedIn, people that you know, friends, families, next-door neighbors. Think about all those past people that you used to work with, all the people that maybe you used to go to school with. Connect with them. Once you get a foundation of connections on LinkedIn, then you can start looking to the people that they're connected with. And who knows, your next customer might be there. Fascinating stuff. As I mentioned, I made sure I've taken some notes here for you guys and gals on the process and some of the scripts that Ken's been using here. If you go to the show notes at www.salesbabble.com, I've got them all documented in there. And as well as links to other past episodes on cold calling and prospecting and things like that. Don't hesitate to go to the website and look at that. Now, if you've got a question or if you've got a comment, if you've got some experience that you'd like to share with other people on this, please reach out to me and connect with me. You can, while you're at the website, you can click the Babble Me button, and that will come right to me. You can send me an email, or you can go into LinkedIn and connect with me. I'm there like all the time. Well, that's all I've got for this week. Until next week, take care and have a highly successful and a profitable selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.